Good morning, everybody. First thing I want to do is, I realized I hadn't gotten a chance to do this yet, and I just have to say this. I don't know who did it, but about a month ago, I walked into my office, and rolled up and tied with a ribbon on my desk was a 2022 Kansas Jayhawks National Championship t-shirt. No note, no nothing, just somebody dropped a t-shirt on my desk. So I don't know who you were, but thank you. I appreciate that. And my wife's upset that I got one and she didn't. So, anyway. So we are back on the highway this morning with Route 66 in a really unbelievable love story. But this is kind of a twisted love story in a way, a never-ending love story, a forever love story, a very loyal-based love story, and maybe that's why the theme this morning is that there is no end to the love of God. That is the theme of the book of Hosea, whose key verse is 13:6, and then in following it, the pattern, the key words are loyal, love. And the structure really breaks down into God painting a picture for us once again. First, he uses Hosea's marriage and talks about the prodigal wife, and then ties that into Hosea's message about the prodigal nation. Again, he paints this amazing picture through something in reality of what the reality is with him to the nation of Israel and to us. And considering this concept of love this morning, I thought it was only appropriate to share with you some of the best Christian pickup lines. So here we go. Is it hot in here, or is that just the Holy Spirit burning inside you? Oh, trust me, these are eye rollers. The sad part is I don't know if people are making these up or people are actually using them, and that's the scary part. So I was reading in the book of Numbers, and I realized something. Yours isn't in there, and I don't have it. Hey, I believe one of my ribs belongs to you. Hi, I'm Will. God's will. I'm usually not very prophetic, but I can see us together. So how many times do I have to walk around you for you to fall in love with me? Now I know why Solomon had 700 wives. It's because he never met you. All right, I'll stop. The truth is that we all kind of love love. It's a blessed thing to most of us, and it's seen everywhere in our music, in our movies, in our books, in our television shows. It's all over the place. So honestly, it could be easy for us when we get into this to fall in love with a love story in Scripture, with the love story of Hosea. And in some ways, it's just like all those other love stories that we can watch or listen to, but then it has its own unbelievable, unique twist. It's very different. It may actually be one of the greatest love stories in the entire Bible, and maybe even one of the greatest love stories in all of history. It's authentic, and it is real. And so we can identify in ways with it. It's also about the idea of brokenness. Brokenness of the heart, brokenness of the home, brokenness of vows, brokenness of life. Wait. Sounds really appealing, doesn't it? It's amazing. It's actually amazing. Here's the story. After a weekend of preaching and delivering his messages, Hosea gets an invitation to dinner. And this dinner happens to be to what will be his future in-laws' house. And it's the first time that he lays eyes on Gomer. And it's one of those things where it's like across the room, their eyes meet, and all of a sudden food has no taste anymore. And he's just completely smitten with the beauty of this woman that he sees, the smile, the hair, the eyes. And the best part is he hears the voice of God whisper to him, "Hey, buddy, that's your wife, you see." And you can imagine the joy and the excitement that comes up to him. And so the start begins here. The lover and his loved one, they meet and they are happily married and enter into that relationship of just the puppy love, of the feelings. No, you're so cute, and I just want to be around you all the time. He's so excited to have her on his arm. But what's interesting is that the people are whispering as they pass. They're trying to understand this connection, this combination, the spiritual leader, the preacher, the messenger of God, connected and on his arm to this woman who is very material-oriented, very worldly in her choices and the way that she lives. Two opposites that have attracted. But Hosea feels like he's won the lottery. I mean, after all, Gomer's name actually means complete. So he's like, look at this. God has put another completion in my life. And he sees their marriage that way. It's lined in a gold accent. Here's the problem. What Hosea doesn't realize is that God is going to use this in ways that are not going to be easy for him. He's very wrong about that gold lining. Maybe it would happen because Gomer didn't feel like she got enough attention, like she was a good focal point to what was happening at home. But Hosea, we can't fault the guy. I mean, he's the messenger of God. He's got a huge responsibility. He's got to communicate to the nation of Israel. And he has to do this in a time where they're prospering, but at the same time, he has to get down on them and say, you need to repent. You may be prospering here, but you're utterly failing over here. You got to tear down the idols. You got to stop the false worship that isn't in tune with the worship of God over here, or I'm going to send Assyria, and they're going to take you over. And this message, it took Hosea away from the home for long days and long nights because God needed him to do what he had to do. And so that slow fade starts. And what we see is that the loved one, Gomer, is now unfaithful. Because the responsibility and the message that Hosea knew was so serious, because of her material and worldliness, she saw as just stupid and pointless. So when Hosea would leave the home, after he was good and gone, she would leave as well. And she would go out looking for the fun. And when he got home, she might not be there. Not only that, some nights he'd go to bed alone. Some nights, she would never come home. And it didn't take long for Hosea to obviously figure out what was going on. But the thing is that even though he figures this out, he, as the lover, remains loyal. He remains faithful to her. He spends his nights in prayer for both the nation of Israel and for his marriage. And then she reveals to him at one point, she comes in and says, I am pregnant with your son. And God tells Hosea, I want you to give him the name Jezreel. And he gives him the name Jezreel because the name Jezreel means and is a reminder that God is going to scatter Israel because of their sin. So now God is using the children that will be born out of their relationship as a way to communicate his picture and his message to the nation. First, that God will scatter the nation of Israel because of their sin. And Hosea, though, he looks at his marriage and goes, ooh, this child, I have hope that this child will be what brings our family back together. Nope. For a time, Gomer may look at him and say, we're having a child. I'm with you. Forgive me. I'm so sorry. But see, then the pattern repeats itself, and she goes right back into that boredom and that feeling of loneliness because Hosea is out on his message for God. And so, again, she's unfaithful to him. And God then reveals that there's a second child, a girl, and that he will name her Lo-Ruhamah. And this name because it's a reminder that God will no longer have compassion on the nation of Israel. He's going to scatter them because of their sin, and he's not going to have compassion on them anymore. They are refusing to listen to the message that Hosea is doing. The line has been crossed, and it's time that Assyria be allowed to conquer his people. But then as that is going to unfold, a third child is revealed. Another boy, Lo-Ammi, which is a reminder that God has now rejected his people. But here's the interesting thing. All of a sudden, Hosea realizes something. It becomes very clear to him. He understands now that what God is doing in his life is reflective of the message he's giving to Israel because he looks upon that third child and realizes, physically, I don't see any resemblance. There is no resemblance to me in this third child. To realize that this is not his son. And as he looks at Lo Ruhamah, he says, there's no really anything in her either. She's not really my daughter. And the pain well up inside him at this point. But he does not leave her. He does not divorce Gomer. He stays true. He stays and he continues to love her. And then one day he comes in and he walks in and there's a whole new discovery. The truth is revealed. Be sure your sin will find you out, because what happens is that this loved one, Gomer, has now abused the gifts of love that have come from Hosea. His loyalty, his unconditional forgiveness of her through all of this. He loves those children. He still takes them as his own, and he continues to love and give to her, but she takes advantage of that. Maybe it was just coming home to a note. Maybe she left a note for him and just said, Reeds, I'm done. I got to get out of this place. I can't take this stress anymore. I'm not doing it. I need the fun back. I'm leaving the kids with you. Don't follow me. Just don't. Don't waste your time. So now Hosea is alone. And he cares for the kids. He feeds them. He tucks them into bed. Then he goes to his own bed. And I would think maybe he lays there wondering why. Why is this happening? But somehow inside him he's going, but I still love her. Because that's what God has commanded me to do. I still love her. But for Gomer, this is the nature of freedom. No ties whatsoever. What this is I don't want the responsibility of what I've already put myself through. I want to continue in the joy of whatever feels good for me. And it's completely selfish. Completely selfish. It's a desire unto her own heart. And I wonder about the whispers from the people. Now, I mean, they were whispering before, but you wonder now that, oops, guys, the pastor's wife left him. She just walked out. I mean, maybe he deserved it. I mean, he's so busy fixing us, he can't even fix his own life. He can't fix his own marriage. But the people who really, truly knew them, knew their relationship, was close friends with them, their reactions might have been different. They may have said, oh, Hosea, good riddance, buddy. She was never good for you. He can do so much better. You can do so much better. She's not weighing you down, man. But for Hosea, it didn't feel that way at all. He still loves her. He still wants her to return. And as it happens for most who experience or choose that selfish freedom of desire in that situation, Gomer experienced her ecstasy. She experienced the joy of life that she was getting out of it, the feel-goods of what the world could give to her, the high of having no tie-down, no responsibility except for herself. But see, that kind of selfish living is always going to find a dead end. It's going to be a slow fade down into a chaotic destruction. And we read that eventually what happens is no one claims her. Instead, she just gets passed from man to man to man to man. And finally, she ends up with a low life that'll take her in just so he has somebody, but this guy can't even provide for their basic needs. And Hosea, he's watching this the entire time. This fade of his beloved that he cares so deeply about and loves so unconditionally. And he sees the state of where things have come to. And so he goes not to her, but he goes to this low life of a guy. And he introduces himself. And you could figure this guy, he's got Hosea's wife living with him. And he's doing things with her that he shouldn't be doing. And so this guy is probably preparing for a fight. He's putting up his fist. He's like, all right, man, we'll do this. And Hosea backs him down and says, no, stop. It's okay. I love her, but you know what? She's not going to choose to return to me. But I want to help. I need to help. I've got to do something. And so he gives the man silver and gold. And he says, I give this to you, but you have to make me one promise. Just use it for the real needs. Don't blow it on things that don't matter. Provide the things you don't have that you really need. And again, the lover remains completely loyal. I'm thinking this guy probably thinks Hosea is crazy. Anybody else? In that situation, I'm thinking this guy thinks he's crazy. But is he going to refuse a free handout? No. Okay, pause the story for a minute. Up to this point, we're in this story, we're connecting to this story. But now I think that some of us, and I know that I've been here too, you're kind of stopping for a minute. You're going, wait, hold on. I'm not seeing the common sense in any of this. This just doesn't seem to make sense. Let me ask something. In that situation, how many of you would honestly and truthfully say, yeah, I would do exactly what Hosea did in that situation? I don't know that any of us would do what Hosea did in that situation. I don't think anybody would take an easy road toward the idea of supporting that kind of unfaithfulness. Loving in that way. And it's exactly that thought that brings me to the idea of what philosopher Blaise Pascal said, love has reasons that reason does not know. See, Hosea acted the part with Gomer that God acted with Israel, and the way that God acts with us. Are we not thankful for that? Maybe Hosea was in the shadows. He's in the alleyway and he's watching that door frame, watching as that lowlife comes home. And Gomer answers the door and his arms are full of groceries and needs, but they were paid for by Hosea. And she opens the door and with ecstatic joy, she flings her arms around this other guy's neck and she praises him and thanks him for all that he's providing for all this stuff. And what's happening is true love actually provided it, false love offered it, and stupidity accepted it. Hosea chapter 2, their mother has been unfaithful. She said, I will go after my lovers who give me my food and my water, my wool and my linen, my olive oil and my drink. She has not acknowledged that I was the one who gave her the grain, the new wine and oil, who lavished on her the silver and the gold. But before we can sit and pronounce judgment on Gomer, I think we stand and look in the mirror. And before God, we realize that we're just like her. I mean, where do we get our clothes, our food, our cars, our homes, our finances? Who is it that they truly come from, and yet, in most cases, is the last one to be thanked for it? We find a way to thank everything and everyone else. Heck, we'll even thank ourselves for what we accomplished. When the truth is, it's God that we should be pouring out our gratitude to. And maybe we question it, not ourselves, but is God really like that? Do we want to question and say, is God really like that? Is what Hosea pictures to us, is that what God really is? Does that unconditional love really exist in that way? Do we really get that kind of grace and acceptance from Him? Yes, exactly. And I think it's proven time and time again throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament, over and over and over again. God is exactly like that. Because you see, years and years and years ago, God created. And in that creation, He put metal into the ground, and He built forests, and He put it in the trees, and He created man, and He put him in those places, and He gave him skills to be able to take care of this place that He'd created. Man ended up mining that metal from the earth, and they'd cut down some of those trees in the forest, and then man made spikes from the metal, and they formed a cross from the wood. And once it was prepared, God came down from heaven, His Son given, and He hung on that cross to show His love for the very people who mocked Him, who built the cross, who formed the nails out of the creation that He'd given them, and then put Him on that cross with those nails. Yeah. God is exactly like that. And why? Because He knew it was the only way that sin would be taken away, that true forgiveness would happen, that salvation would be offered to us, the way to show that His unconditional love was true through and through. His own life given. There's no end to the love of God, and there is nothing like it. And yet there's those of us that still find a way to question, because then we get to that point where we go, well, what about after I choose Jesus? What happens after I choose him? Because I still screw up. We all still screw up, and I did screw up, and when I did, I dug it deeper still. I told that lie, and on top of that lie, I told a lie, on top of that lie, I told a lie, and I just dug the hole deeper and deeper and deeper, and I fell harder, and I fell farther, and I ran the opposite way because I wanted to hide. I was embarrassed. I was ashamed of what I did, and so I tried to tuck it into that back corner of that closet. But then it got so overwhelming that I got fatigued and so tired and I couldn't run any farther. And I'd just been crushed by that hole of sin and despair. And at that moment, there's this tap. And it's God. And He's right there. And He says, hey, I followed you. I've pursued you. By the power of the love that I have for you. I don't know what you don't get, but I'm not letting you go. I paid the price for that sin. If you've chosen me, I've provided the way that there's no longer separation. So I'm going to be with you every step of the way. All you have to do is turn around and reach for me, even when you screw up after that. That's why I gave you the grace. Because that's who our God is. And there's no end to His love. See, and this was the continued story that the loved one just gets into deeper trouble. Gomer takes it even farther, and God, I don't know how many times I see myself in this. Because see, eventually that lowlife, the handout from Hosea runs out, and he doesn't really love Gomer, and he realizes he needs money, so he only sees his worth in getting rid of her. So here, I can sell her for slavery. And in those times, it was utter humiliation. They would cut all her hair off and strip her completely naked and throw her out into the squares. The crowds would gather to bid, along with the others that they did this to. And God, He told Hosea, I need you to go attend the auction. You can imagine the whispers that continue as they see him come. They gawk as they prepare for the auctioneer to begin. And Gomer comes up on the block. He says, how much for this one? And the bids start coming in. 10 pieces of silver, 12 pieces of silver, and then 15. And everybody stops and turns and stares. Who's going to get 15 for her? It's Hosea. People stare in confusion and wonder. Some of them probably even snickering in laughter and humor. And then it's, somebody goes 15 and a bushel of barley. And Hosea goes 15 and a bushel and a half of barley. The auctioneer pounds his gavel. Sold! Hosea's won. And he takes her. And as the whispers continue, Hosea realizes the role that he's in and the message that he is producing for God and how it represents exactly what God is going to do with Israel, exactly what God does with us. See, once again, this reckless love pulls through, and the lover remains loyal. It loves, it pursues, and in the end it saves the loved one. I'll leave the 99 for you, because that's how much I love you. So I bought her for myself for 15 pieces of silver and a homer and a half of barley. And I said to her, you shall stay with me for many days. You shall not play the prostitute, nor shall you have another man. And so I also will be toward you. Hosea says, you've had your fun. You've had your freedom. But now you need to know what real love is. Come back to the truth and know where it actually exists. This was my purpose of purchase. Hosea says this to her. God says it to us. I love you. I want only you. And I only want you to want me. Because my desire is to keep you pure. How many of us have had that moment where we go, really? Are you serious? Look at me. You want this? Yes. Because God, go again. Love a woman who is loved by another man and is an adulteress, even as the Lord loves the children of Israel, though they turn to other gods. God said, it doesn't matter. Hosea, you do this because it represents what I'm doing with them. And once again, Hosea responds to Gomer as God did to Israel and as God does to us. Can you think back and remember the time in your life when that truth hit you? Have you hit a point yet that the understanding of God's love just emotionally overwhelms you because you've never felt it like that before? All of a sudden, there's a realization that just hits in a way you've never experienced. I was 17 years old at a summer camp. And we just finished up in our evening chapel service. And the cross had been placed up before us, and they had spoken so deeply. Now, I'd accepted Christ when I was 6 years old, and about a year before that, I'd really started to understand my faith for myself. But it was at 17 at that summer camp as I left that speaker's talk that night on the love of God and the true meaning of the cross and the hope that came with it, that I bawled my eyes out walking back to the cabin because I just looked up and I said, you love me that much? You hung up there? You were tortured, beaten, mocked, scorned, broken in every way. I'm so not worthy. I've run so many times, but you still allow me to come back. The power of the love from God was realized. And when we hear Him speak in that way, it's amazing. And He speaks that to Israel because if they repent, He's always like, I want you back. There's always that idea of restoration that comes. He says, oh, how can I give you up, Israel? This is His love for His people. How can I let you go? How can I destroy you? My heart is torn within me, and my compassion overflows. So many times He wants to just go. But then He lifts His foot and He looks down. And He can't do it. And we need to come to this realization. For those of us that may have not gotten it, you got to get that understanding. Like really soaking that in and understanding that through His Word and through what He did. Because the love of God is an emotional, unconditional, unfailing, unbelievable, incomprehensible love. Maybe the application comes a little bit more simply this way. Gomer, of course, is back home, but I'm sure that now as we flip a little bit just to the ending, and we take a little focus maybe off of Hosea's whole part in this, and you wonder at this point if Gomer just looks at him and goes, why? Why did you buy me? Why in the world would you choose to still love me after everything I've done to you? And Hosea gives her the first lesson. He says, I don't love you because of what you are. I love you in spite of what you are. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Despite everything you've done, I love you. Maybe that's one of the most amazing things about God's love is it's a permanent love. See, God's not looking for the cream of the crop. He doesn't need the best of the best or those who are trying to sit on a seat of perfection. Because it's not for what you are. Instead, God says, I know what you can be. I know who you really are. We struggle because we replace it with lies. If I do more, if I give more, if I go on missions trips, if I pray more, if I fill out just one more encouragement card this morning, if I put just $100 more on that check, if I give one more half an hour time of service to the church. No. Nothing you can do is going to make God love you more or less. Salvation comes by faith through grace. And it comes by grace through faith. It's not by works, because if it's by works and what we do, then we get tangled up again in that selfishness of thinking that we're the ones doing something. It's not what you are. He gives you His love because that's who He is. And that's the second lesson. No matter how far from me you go, I'm right there all the time, watching, waiting for you to wake up and return to me. For there is no end to my unfailing love. At a point in time where stepping into that next phase of life, I said, God, I can't do this without you. I said, if you're going to lead me there, if that's what I'm going to do, you got to take my hand. You got to take my hand, because the only way I'm walking through this is if you're holding on to me. Well, let me tell you something. God took my hand. In that moment, too, it was so real that I thought somebody around me had taken my hand. Because the presence of God was felt in that way. Do you think I strayed? Oh, yeah. Plenty of times after that. And years later, I said, God, I'm so sorry. I know what you really need from me, so take my hand again and we'll go. And He didn't take it. And I was distraught until the voice of God said, I never let go. We all have a human tendency that causes us to want to run from God, and at those times we wander so far that we wonder maybe where God has gone. We break to a point where we're like, where did you go, God? And in those times, the question you need to ask yourself is, who moved? Because just like the story I just told you, no matter how far we go, He's right there all the time. Watching and waiting for us to wake up and return, saying there's no end. My love is unfailing. It's endless. It's perfect. I promise you there's no end to my love. In light of this, I want to encourage you this morning. And I want to close with a lyric video to a song. This is an older song. This is a beautiful song. And I think it captures very powerfully the idea of this message of what God is so desiring from us and the way that His love reaches out as He says, take my hand and just walk with me.